Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and yes, you read the title, and you know exactly what it is that I'm reviewing. Yes, this documentary that I was looking forward to reviewing, talking about and such, and well, thus I'm doing it now. You're watching my review on it. Yes. This documentary all about Pixar. And, you know, especially for me and for you guys being Pixar fanatics, this is, of course, the perfect documentary to watch all about Pixar and the time when this documentary came out, where they were at the time of this documentary, and yeah, just knowing the history and facts that, you know, some that we didn't even know until we saw this documentary, from their early beginnings, where some of these genius, brilliant minds, you know, who started Pixar, where they were at first, and when they would come together. Pixar would be born in the 80s from there on, and when they would join forces with Disney, and through the ups and downs that Pixar would go through, but at the same time, they found a way to get back up on their feet and such, and with the amazing first batch of films they would bring to us, and even when at a certain point Pixar was at a dark place and with Disney, but somehow, and a miracle happened when, yeah, everything would be good with Pixar and Disney, but of course, that especially goes for Pixar. But yeah, so that's right, guys. I am finally reviewing, from 2007, the Pixar story. Yes, the Pixar story. Yeah, I gotta say, because yeah, this documentary, again, I've been looking forward to reviewing this, which I'm doing now, and you know, ever since I first watched this, and I loved the documentary instantly. I knew about this documentary for a long time, even before I finally got to watch it. I'm pretty sure that I might had seen some of the trailers, maybe, and around the time when it was coming out. I can't remember, but, you know. But, yeah, overall, knowing about this documentary, and, you know, this being a documentary on Pixar, and, well, when I finally got to watch it, thanks to Disney Plus, yeah, again, I loved the documentary instantly. Yeah. Just everything about it from beginning to end, where Pixar was, even before Pixar even existed, and their early beginnings, and again, some ups and downs that they would go through, and, you know, money trouble and such, and even when, you know, they joined forces with Pixar, and when they would make the first ever computer animated feature film, that was their goal, you know, even before Pixar existed. Ed Catmull especially, those that were doing computer animation, stuff like that for other things, you know, with doing computer technology, they hoped that one day they would make the first ever computer animated feature film, and fast forward, and yeah, so, but yeah, like, again, I really enjoy this documentary, and again, it's a perfect documentary for anybody who loves Pixar, animation and such, and those of us that, of course, grew up with the Pixar films, yeah. Yeah, so, again, it's a really good documentary, and I of course, recommend it. Okay, so now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. The story of the pioneering computer animation studio, Pixar, featuring contributions from the studio's bosses and a host of actors who have lent their voices to their creations, including Tom Hanks. Films such as Toy Story and A Bug's Life have led to the studio becoming one of the most consistently, I think, yeah, I'm saying that right, successful, both critically and financially, of recent years. Okay, so getting into the documentary itself, because, yeah, you know, And the way that the documentary opens, nice, because, over 100 years ago, because what started as, something that you spin, that kind of piece and such, where you spin and, these pictures come to life, and from there on, a montage of, the earliest cartoons from, say, Gertie the dinosaur, a clown, Felix the cat, Oswald the lucky rabbit, to the first, one of the first cartoons to have sound, which being Steamboat Willie, and, other Disney cartoons that we would see, like the Skeleton Dance, and other, pieces of animation, like Gerald McBoing Boing, the Looney Tunes cartoons, Popeye, Betty Boop, and other later Disney animation materials like 101 Dalmatians, Mary Poppins with the dancing penguins, of course. Well, at a certain point in the 70s, when computers, making things come to life and such, like a hand or a face would be born, and, well, when, say, Tron would emerge, and, well, the Luxo lamp, and, of course, Toy Story, and just, yeah, it's amazing. And I like that we hear archival voices of some of the characters like Sully, Celia, Syndrome, and Mr. Incredible. And just, yeah, what a great way to start off the documentary. And yeah, so, the early beginnings of Pixar, and even before there was a Pixar, like, most notably, John Lasseter, one of the fathers of Pixar, his early beginnings when he attended Cal Arts, founded by Walt Disney himself. And from there on, because, his love of animation, he knew that that's what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. And yeah, when he applied for Cal Arts, and 2 short films that he would make, from, say, Nightmare, and most notably Lady and the Lamp, and even when he got a job at Disneyland, sweeping Tomorrowland, but even when, he would go bigger, being a skipper on the Jungle Cruise, if anybody knows about that. And even when, because he went back to do Cal Arts and graduate and such, and at Cal Arts he would meet other familiar faces that we would know as of now, big names in the realm of animation, like John Musker, Ron Clements, Tim Burton, and Brad Bird, yeah. Well, John Lasseter, when he got to be a part of the Walt Disney Animation Studios, along with his other fellow CalArt, buddies and such. Glenn Keane also being another one of them. Yeah, because, things going okay and pretty well for John and everybody else. But, yeah, but at a certain point, because, the hand-drawn animation was, things were kind of not looking good for Disney, and, because, best can be said for, Brad Bird, and even though he's not mentioned in the documentary, Don Bluth, because, Don Bluth being a part of Disney for a while, when, some of them realized that Disney was not as it used to be. And, even what Glenn Keane had to say in, animation at that point, and when it came to the Fox and the Hound. But it wasn't until when Tron happened, and those from, say, Glenn Keane and most notably John Lasseter being marbled by the computer animation in Tron, and they were asking to themselves, why can't we do this? And, well, that's when, at one point, Glenn and John, each of them, they came up with an idea to incorporate hand-drawn characters in a computer background and such. The environment being computer animated, like, say, a bed or the walls or anything, all except for the characters themselves. And they tested this with, doing Where the Wild Things Are. That piece of footage, if you've seen that before, and most notably being featured in this documentary. And those at Disney, and what 2 members of Walt's 9 Old Men had to say about this. Only one of them spoke, even though he's in there. I'm referring to Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. Ollie Johnson was the only one that talked. Frank Thomas had nothing to say. I don't know, but that's just how it is in the documentary. Because the mentioning of, the game and, those being terrified of using computers and such, all except for John. John was going to take the task using a computer and such with animation. And another idea that John had was to do a film adaptation of The Brave Little Toaster. Yep, with computer animation to it. Obviously, the same thing would happen for the original idea for doing Where the Wild Things Are, CG background and such, and with the characters being hand-drawn, that whole thing. And John pitching it to the heads of Disney, most notably Ed Hansen. But, yeah, wasn't looking too good, and even when John, assured them that, this would have the normal budget of a movie, $100 million and such, but to them, them saying that, it's gotta be cheap and with a computer and so on, and, yeah, that was weird, and for John, and then 5 minutes later, he was called in to the office, and, they told him that, your project's been shelved, or, however they said it, and basically, he got fired, he got terminated, and because according to Don Hahn, they didn't know what to do with him. So they just booted him off the company and such, and yeah, all of John's dreams and to work for Disney going downhill. That sucks, yeah. And obviously the same goes for, say, Tim Burton, Brad Bird, because Brad Bird also having those dreams of working at Disney, but it's not what he thought it would be. Pretty sure, yeah, that goes for everybody else, but yeah. But also, enter Ed Catmull. He apparently, in his early days, wasn't good at doing animation and such, so he went to do computer technology and such, and at a certain point, and after the release of Star Wars, George Lucas was interested in what to do next with a computer and such, because, with the motion control camera, used for Star Wars, that whole thing, and Lucas hiring Ed Catmull, to work with the computer and such, and from Ed Catmull, Bill Reeves and those working with computers, yet they had no idea how to animate a character. And Ed Catmull, who had a run-in with John Lasseter at a computer press conference at the Queen Mary, the ship, there was a computer graphics conference there. Ed Catmull, being well aware of John's project, The Brave Little Toaster, and, according to John, Ed was asking him, how's The Brave Little Toaster going? And, yeah, what John had to say to him is that, they shelved it, he was leaving Disney, and according to Ed, he didn't give him the specific details, of him leaving Disney, but, obviously Ed figured it out later on. And it was not long until, Ed and John, because they would join forces, and trying to figure what they can do, and with computers and such, and also the fact that John Lasseter didn't take that long for him to be hired at, the graphics company and such, doing the computers at Lucasfilm, with Ed Catmull, Alvy Ray Smith, and with Bill Reeves, and Alvy Ray Smith, sorry, yeah. And, one of the first things that John did, of course, as we all know, is bring 2 characters to life in the world of computers, which, of course, being the adventures of Andre and Walibi. Yeah. Do this little short and, bringing these 2 characters to life and such, and what they can do with the computer and so on. But even after that, then came the birth of the Pixar computer, and them trying to sell the Pixar computers, and what the Pixar computers were like at first, for hospitals and so on, just, yeah. But George Lucas, however, he was only interested in making movies and not wanting to run a computer company. And, at least George Lucas was kind enough to wish them the best of luck, and, he knew, of course, that from Ed Catmull, Alvy Ray Smith, and so on, that they were dreaming of making the first ever computer animated film, but, yeah, George was not going to be involved in that. And sometime a little later, Steve Jobs would enter the picture, and yes, the late Steve Jobs, who would step in, and he would buy Pixar and invest in such, and yeah, even he liked the sound of it. The hopes of one day making the first ever computer animated feature film. He loved that dream, but also, making money and such, But still, he liked, not just with the money, just into finance and such, but still, really wanting to do something fun and good, and something amazing that nobody would see before, Yeah, so again, Pixar was born, and, well, one of their very first short films that they did, with Pixar was, of course, Luxo Jr. And John was inspired when, he happened to have the classic Luxo lamp and was moving it around as if it were alive and so on, and thus, and with the geometric shapes and, building the model of the Luxo lamp and making a baby Luxo, and from there on, and the ball, of course, the iconic Pixar ball, just, yeah. And everybody being amazed and marveled by this short film that Pixar did, and the next upcoming Pixar shorts that they would do in the 80s from, well, Red's Dream, Tin Toy, and Knick Knack, yeah. But at the same time, while they were making the short films, they never made money off of them. And not to mention that Steve Jobs, his company was losing money for 5 years and such, yeah. But also, what would happen next for Pixar? They would make some commercials, if anybody is well aware of that. And they're, of course, they're out there on YouTube, yeah. That they made some commercials, like, I can think of, say, like, they did a bit of, Pillsbury Doughboy, yeah. They also did, bit of Chips Ahoy and a bunch of others, just, yeah, liquid stuff, and, well, 2 new animators would step in, Pixar, after John. John was the first animator to step in. The next 2, or should I say 3, that would step in would be Joe Ranft, Andrew Stanton, and Pete Docter. I presume that, yeah, Joe was probably the 4th animator to step in. Yeah, because Andrew was first after John, then Pete next after Andrew, And after Andrew, Pete, and Joe, Bud Luckey would step in, being the 5th animator, according to John. Yeah, I remember knowing about that. Yeah, that Bud Luckey was the 5th animator to be hired at Pixar. So yeah, Pete and Andrew, joining in, and thus, one of the first things that they would do is to help animate and bring, these pieces of animation to life for commercials. But then, at one point, Pixar joining forces with Disney. Disney being fascinated with what Pixar was doing and with the short films, and at the time, those that were the heads of Disney, Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Roy Disney, as well as, for the heck of it to mention them, Peter Schneider and Tom Schumacher. Yeah, them too. And yeah, when Disney and Pixar would join forces, well, Pixar would lend Disney the helping hand of doing caps, adding digital backgrounds and with the animation, that whole thing. And, from, say, The Rescuers Down Under, and most famously, Beauty and the Beast. Well, even when they would also do, say, The Lion King, yeah, that too. I'm pretty sure a little bit of Aladdin, yeah. But, because Disney and Pixar were joining forces at that time in the early 90s with the cap systems, the money wasn't coming in still for poor Pixar. Not to mention, Disney was trying to lure John away from Pixar to direct a feature film, but John flat out refused. He rather stay with the struggling company. And that's when, and after a 3rd time of rejection from John, it occurred to Peter Schneider that, if we can't get John to do a film with us here, then why not we do a movie with him at Pixar and such, and thus Peter Schneider calling up Ed Catmull, proposing the idea of doing a computer animated feature film, which of course, that being their lifelong dream. However, originally at first, John and those at Pixar were wanting to do a 30-minute film on television with the character of Tin Toy, a Tin Toy Christmas, if anybody knows about that. But Peter Schneider, told Ed Catmull, oh, forget that, make a full-length feature. And, and also said by Ed Catmull, if you think, according to Ed Catmull, and with what else Peter Schneider said, if you think you can do a 30-minute film, then you can expand it to, a 90-minute film and such, and Ed was like, okay, I'll take that. And yeah, and thus, Disney and Pixar would once again join forces, making a buddy picture. Which, of course, being this. Yes, of course, we know. And thus, things went underway to develop their first ever feature film, and this being the first ever computer animated film. According to John, they did not want to do a musical, nor a fairy tale. They did not want to do the exact same thing that Disney was doing at the time, especially during the Renaissance. They wanted to do something different and new, the way they wanted to do it, what kind of story they can tell themselves, and thus, the idea of a computer animated film all about toys who come to life when there's no human in sight. Not in the room or anything like that. And one of the first actors that they, had in consideration, most notably from John, was Tom Hanks. And yeah, Tom Hanks appearing in this documentary. And remembering that they showed him this test footage of, an audio clip from Turner and Hooch. I'm sure you've seen that. You're eating the car. And Tom Hanks really got a kick out of it, and thus he signed on. Yeah. And then when Tim Allen would step in to voice Buzz Lightyear and what he would say about the character, and yeah, he too appearing in this documentary. Also, the mentioning of Black Friday, of course. It wouldn't be the same if they did not mention Black Friday. Yeah, because, even that's its own piece of material in the bonus features of the Toy Story Blu-ray, in fact, some of the footage from some of those who appear in the Pixar story being used for the little Black Friday documentary of Toy Story. Because, yeah, things were not looking too good at first for Toy Story, even when, yeah, most notably Jeffrey Katzenberg wanted Toy Story to be edgy, And, well, the first screening they had down at Disney, complete chaos. It was horrible. Even Roy Disney, yeah, the late Roy Disney, who appears in this documentary, his comment on the Black Friday thing of Toy Story, it was horrible. It was dreadful. And those that, what they had to say about how the character of Woody was at first, it's Woody at first being someone you just wanted to strangle, literally. That's how much he was despised at first. But sure enough, and when at first Disney, after the horrible test screening, they wanted to shut production down, Pixar would not let that happen. They requested to give them 2 weeks to redo the whole thing, and thus, that's what they did, and things turned out much better. And thus, the film kept resuming production and such. And with all the struggles that they had, and, trying to make a really good film, and the fact that this was the first ever computer animated feature film, they succeeded. Yeah, because who'd have thought that in 1995, what Toy Story would have been like, and just, yeah, it was phenomenal, amazing. And, Roy even being a bit nervous about this, but yeah, and even like talking about the climax and, the chase sequence, just, yeah, amazing. It was amazing. Yeah, so after the release of Toy Story, things were looking good. However, Disney was getting all the finances, and they were making money off of Toy Story. Pixar, not that much, and that's when, right after Toy Story, Steve Jobs decided that they had to go public. Yeah, and sell some stuff and such, I'm sure you know what it is, but I'm not really an expert on that kind of talk, but anyways. But yeah, so, well, after Toy Story, they've had one success, and that being their first. They were terrified for a while, like, what was going to happen next? Could they strike lightning twice? what? And they would find out when production would begin on their second feature film, A Bug's Life. And yeah, with what they did in A Bug's Life, and you know, the documentary does not mention this, and probably it's for the best. I mean, you know, at least they mention them by name very later on in the documentary, but no, they don't bring this up, and probably for the best. You know, the whole thing of A Bug's Life versus ants, you know, that whole thing, just, yeah. Because it's obvious that, yeah, Pixar and DreamWorks were being very competitive that year, and they had each of them, two computer animated films on bugs and such coming out, you know, close to one another, you know, during those 2 months, October, November. Ants came first and then A Bug's Life, but yeah. But you know, overall, it was Pixar that got the last laugh, yeah, because A Bug's Life proved to be good. Not as good as the first Toy Story film, but yeah, it was still a good computer animated film, and that being Pixar's second. Even as I recall, you know, being better than Ants, you know, but no hard feelings on Ants, because Ants was pretty good too, but yeah, it was Pixar who got the last laugh, so, because obviously, I'm pretty sure that, yeah, around the time when those two bug films were coming out, or should I say, ant films, yeah, because that Ants and A Bug's Life centering on ants, most notably, yeah, because I'm sure that, you know, the public knew this, that, well, that A Bug's Life, with that coming out of nowhere, here comes DreamWorks saying that they're doing a computer animated film on bugs. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, of course, you know, being responsible for this, he took the bug idea with him. It's so obvious. If you know that whole thing, just, yeah. And to think that, you know, what could have been DreamWorks' first animated film was Prince of Egypt. But then here comes Ants, and Katzenberg is, you know, the word is that Katzenberg, you know, rushing Ants to come out before A Bug's Life and Prince of Egypt. You know, to heck with Prince of Egypt, we're gonna release Ants first, and that's gonna be our first animated film. And that's what happened, you know. You know, no offense to Jeffrey Katzenberg. I like and respect Jeffrey Katzenberg, but yeah, that was kind of, pardon my French, but kind of a dick move on what he did. But, you know, you can argue that, yeah, because how Disney treated him. But if you know fully about this and Jeffrey's relationship with Disney at the time, and at a certain point when, yeah, things were really getting out of hand, and especially with The Lion King, you know, but anyways. But, yeah, but jumping back to where I was of A Bug's Life, because, yeah, how big they would go with A Bug's Life, and, you know, A Bug's Life being the first computer animated film with widescreen. They had big sets, big cast of characters. It was amazing, you know. And the next step after Toy Story, and, well, more new steps that they would take after A Bug's Life. And yeah, and after the release and success of A Bug's Life, well, John, he was very exhausted after doing Toy Story and A Bug's Life, and he was going to be taking a much-needed break and such for a while, and he hadn't seen that much of his family while doing those two movies. But when Toy Story 2 happened, at first, John was not going to be attached to directing it. He would leave it in the hands of Lee Unkrich, who does appear in this documentary, and Ash Brannon. But things were not looking good for Toy Story 2. How far they came working on this, and it had a deadline when it was supposed to come out specifically. You know, November of 1999. But yet, those at Pixar, even John Lasseter, knew as well that, yeah, it was not looking good for Toy Story 2. And, well, that's when Ed Catmull and those knew that they had to have John be attached to this and be the main director, while, well, Lee and Ash, they would still be attached as directors, you know, just, you know, still co-directors. So, yeah, and John's wife, who also appears in this documentary, you know, what she stated, you know, she said it best that, you know, Nancy, that, you know, told her husband that, her and the family support him all the way up, but, he's got to, not just be there at Pixar, but also be with family and, for a while change his day-to-day routines and so on. And yeah, I can imagine that, that was quite a struggle for John, but hey, it's obvious that he managed, he pulled through, and look what would happen next for Toy Story 2. And during all those 9 months, that they had to start from scratch. And all throughout those months before November, just, no time to waste. Go, 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 go. Just get this done, and so on. And also, Randy Newman, who makes an appearance in this documentary, and the mentioning of, how he thought it was brave by, including a very emotional, power-hitting song number, When She Loved Me, that whole thing. And, even Tom Hanks commenting that, about him and Tim Allen, that them being, old men crying over that song sequence. I mean, it's very emotional, so who can blame Tom and Tim? But, just all the, struggles and the challenges they went through making Toy Story 2, and when it was all done, even when at one point, and it's actually not mentioned in the documentary, now that I realize it, that Toy Story 2 was almost gone. If you know that story, because it almost vanished, but thankfully it was saved. A copy of it was saved, and from there on, when it finally was released on the exact schedule and date, it always had originally, Toy Story 2 turned out to be a success, even though saying that, it's probably better than the first. I would have to agree. No hard feelings on the first Toy Story film, but I've stated this even when I reviewed Toy Story 2 that, I enjoyed Toy Story 2 more than, say, the first. And for me, that's a tie between Toy Story 2 and Toy Story 3. I also enjoy Toy Story 3. And I'm sure the same goes for some of you, enjoying those two Toy Story films. But anyways, and even Ed Catmull making a comment, when Toy Story 2 happened, it's at that moment they learned who they are and what they're like as a company and so on. And not to mention that some of those at Pixar would definitely be needing a 1 year off from doing another film and such. And, well, also, not to mention that where they were at the time, and when it came to their first 3 films, the studio that they were at, well, they first resided in Point Richmond, and man, because all the struggles that they went through, like having to evacuate the buildings, and just, all the stuff they went through, and Steve Jobs realizing that, they're expanded and so on, and that's when the people at Pixar were moved to Glendale, California, to their new official home, the new official primary home of Pixar, as we all know, and this being a paradise for animators, a Pixar's paradise and such, and how it's said in the documentary, And can't forget to mention that the narrator for this documentary is Stacy Keach, if I'm saying his last name right. He's got an excellent voice, especially for narration. He did a good job being the narrator for this documentary. But so things looking better than ever for those at Pixar now that they have a new official home, and well, they would of course soon get underway for their next project, and this time John would not helm the next one, especially after Toy Story 2. It'd be Toy Story 2 all over again if he took over another one. So that's when he decided that for Pixar's next upcoming films, he would leave them in the hands of his animation buddies, Andrew and Pete. And, well, because he knew that they seemed to have potential to directing a film of their own. And the first one to do this was Pete Docter. John chose Pete, according to the documentary, and thus Pete would helm Pixar's next 4th feature film, and being one of my favorites, Monsters Incorporated. And and it was quite a challenge for Pete at first, because he never directed a movie before, nor was he an associated director, co-director and such. None of that. Sure, I mean, he directed some short films of his very own at Cal Arts and so on, but not a feature film. Yeah, this was a big challenge for Pete, filling in the shoes for John Lasseter, you know, directing the next movie. But he managed, yeah. And this movie about monsters, which was an idea that they had, you know, the famous lunch, when it came to them still working on Toy Story, them coming up with ideas for what could be their next big feature films, and one about monsters would be the next one after, well, Toy Story 2, yeah. Because, you know, the thing is, A Bug's Life came first, and then when we got a sequel to Toy Story 2, the next one, of course, being Monsters, and, you know, you get the point. But, yeah. And Billy Crystal, who appears in this documentary, and what he has to say about the guys at Pixar, and commenting about Mike Wazowski, and the creative things that Monsters, Inc. brings, and how, you know, Monsters, Inc. was another one that took them to another big step, well, most notably with the door vault sequence, yeah. The challenges that they went through doing Monsters Incorporated and how big they went this time, and just, yeah. And of course, Monsters, Inc. turning out to be another big success for Pixar, yeah. And then after Monsters Incorporated, well, now the wheels were turned to Andrew. Andrew to helm the next big feature film for Pixar after Pete. And, well, because when it came to, and it's in the documentary footage of the box office reception for Monsters, Inc., you know, being reported at Pixar, and Brad Bird, who's behind a camera, he's video diarying and, you know, pointing it to Andrew, and, you know, the pressure on him and so on, just, yeah. So, for Andrew, what he would do, well, it's another idea that they had at the famous lunch that Andrew would take, yeah. That of course being a movie about talking fish out in the ocean, which of course being Finding Nemo. And Andrew, you know, having a connection with Finding Nemo, and, well, because he had gone to this aquarium with his young son, and being fascinated by these fish in the aquarium, and wondering how that would look in the world of computer animation. And not to mention, one big plot in Finding Nemo that Andrew experienced himself was him being an overprotective father. That whole thing, just, yeah. And how that's incorporated into the character of Marlin in Finding Nemo. It's amazing. And yeah, Finding Nemo was another big step for Pixar because, well, most notably, water. That being a big one. I mean, because again, when they did environments and organic stuff and, you know, in the world of A Bug's Life, and when it would come to Monsters, Inc., you know, the big door vault, and now when it comes to Finding Nemo, they're doing computer animated water, which could be very tricky and such, but they of course found a way. And looking at a little behind the scenes of Finding Nemo, and the dailies, and like there's one with, you know, the whole thing of Marlin telling Nemo, you know, sea turtles, I met one, and how the animation looks, and Nemo, he's looking down. He's not looking at his father, and Andrew, you know, pointing out to the animator in charge of that shot, you know, he looks like he's dead because of the eyes down, so, you know, having to go back and redo that and to find a good specific way, and yeah, that's awesome. Because, yeah, you know, Pixar being so good at that, because when it seems like at first that there are some shots that, they're missing something and it doesn't seem quite right. And when going back and redoing it, much better, and it's got to be done really good. You see, just, yeah, you get my point. It's amazing. Yeah, and, well, once again, Finding Nemo being another big success for Pixar. And, you know, how it would be well-received, and just, yeah, it's amazing. And not long after Finding Nemo, well, Pixar's next big feature film, and not to mention that, it was mentioned early on about, you know, John Lasseter saying that, and when they moved to their new official home, their plan was to release a film once a year, and yeah, that'd be challenging and such, and what John says, but yeah. I mean, when at a certain point they started doing that, yeah, doing pretty well and such. But anyways, I mean, at times they would skip a year, and such, but still, anyways. So after Finding Nemo, again, well, a new face would step into Pixar, and that, of course, being, now, enter Brad Bird. Now, the thing is, Brad Bird, he had already stepped into Pixar. I think it was around the time when, in between A Bug's Life and Toy Story. Well, not to mention when he was about done with the Iron Giant, yeah. And thus, him stepping into the Pixar family, not to mention John had always wanted Brad to be a part of the Pixar family, but he was unable to for a while because doing other animation materials like, working at Fox Animation, then moving his way to Warner Brothers, doing The Iron Giant, and after the box office disaster of The Iron Giant, that's when John asked him again, and thus, he was now on board, and yeah. An idea that Brad had for quite a long time, and when he would step into Pixar, that's when it would finally happen, it would be underway. This idea of an animated feature film, which was originally going to be hand-drawn, 2D animated, but when it came to Pixar, yeah. An idea about a story of a family of superheroes, and what would go on with this superhero family, the struggles, and what they would get themselves into, and just, yeah. Yeah, and, well, The Incredibles being another big step for Pixar, another challenge, because The Incredibles was Pixar's first ever computer-animated film with an all-star human cast. You have the humans, you have hair, the fabric, explosions, water, fabric and hair underwater, fast-pacing shots, and because it's a superhero film, just, yeah. Wow. And, well, also, Brad Bird stepping in Pixar, basically, him just shaping things up at Pixar, and the mentioning of wood-fire pizza, and Brad Bird, just, yeah, we're the studio that makes hit after hit, if you know that whole thing. Just, yeah. And, well, Brad Bird having that experience already, being out there, in Hollywood and such, and, well, even when he was doing Warner Brothers, when he was working at Warner Brothers, I should say, doing The Iron Giant. Not to mention, he would bring some of those from The Iron Giant, his Iron Giant crew members coming on board to Pixar doing The Incredibles, like most notably Teddy Newton. And yeah, Pixar doing The Incredibles, a big challenge for them, but sure enough, when The Incredibles did come out, another big success for them. And not long after The Incredibles release, there was a point when, yeah, the world of animation was not looking too good. 2D animation, just, what? Because that would just be a what the crap moment, because, like, I'm pretty sure, yeah, anybody who heard about this on the news when it happened, that apparently 2D animation was going extinct, because, there was a lot that felt that in order for an animated film to be a really good successor, it would have to be computer animated, and those felt that 2D was failing, but that's clearly not the point. And best said by Ed Catmull, because, what DreamWorks and Disney were going through, because Disney and DreamWorks in America, them doing hand-drawn animated feature films and such, and they weren't doing that great. It's because of the story. Best said by Ed Catmull, and I agree, because, yeah, it's just that what was causing the hand-drawn animated films to fail, and at the box office, was the stories to them were not that strong enough. That's why. I mean, who says that? Why? And just whatever got some of those thinking that, oh, it's 2D animated, CG is much better and hip, 2D, it sucks. That's bullcrap. And even Ed Catmull said it best that those at Pixar, well, they love computer animation, but they also love 2D animation. And it's clear that, well, 2D is responsible for them being where they are and doing computer animation. So, yeah. And just, yeah, how it was brought up in the news articles and so on, and the Disney Animation Studios shutting down, most notably at Disney's Hollywood Studios, back then being called MGM Studios, and in Disneyland Paris. Just heartbreaking, obviously, for them. Even Michael Eisner was feeling that way too, and thinking that they should do computer animation now. And how Roy E. Disney felt about this too. He was not happy about this, and that is one of the reasons that he for a while stepped down being a part of Disney, was because how things were looking at for the company, and especially Michael Eisner handling this badly, being a CEO. And even, Pixar being ashamed of this, and, them being used as an excuse or something, and how Ed Catmull best said it, yeah, that's ridiculous. And it seemed at a certain point that Pixar and Disney were going to go their separate ways, and Steve Jobs was underway going to start talking with other big movie studios to partner with them, and not to mention that Pixar being an independent company. And those at Pixar fearing that if they would merge with another movie studio, then they would become nothing more but a factory that makes movies for the sake of money. It was looking bad for Pixar. Yeah. Them just, their hearts sinking, feeling very depressed by all this. Yeah, nightmare fuel for them at that point. And, well, when things were starting to look bad for Pixar and Disney altogether, not to mention Disney was underway planning to open a new animation studio where they would make nothing but direct-to-sequel, DVD sequels and such, of Pixar films that were already made by Pixar, and even Ed Catmull commenting that, to them it felt like, the creations that they created, the characters that came straight from them, like their own children, being taken away from them by another parent. It's just devastating. But, again, when things were starting to look really bad for both Pixar and Disney, hope stepped in when Michael Eisner made the very smart decision that, because, he knew that things weren't looking too good, and thus he announced that he would resign from being CEO, and thus whom would take his place would be Robert Iger. Bob Iger, of course, yeah. And one of the first things that Bob Iger did, and when he became the new CEO, well, is when he took a trip to Tokyo Disneyland for a special opening ceremony and such. I think it was Hong Kong, yeah, Hong Kong Disneyland, where it had occurred to him, and seeing those characters from the Pixar films, that, something had to be done, and, for Pixar and Disney to stay together, and, just couldn't live without one another. So, thus, Disney would buy Pixar, Pixar would become a part of the Disney family, and special promotions for Ed Catmull, John Lasseter, and, well, Steve Jobs. And for each Catmull, John, and Steve, well, for Steve, he stepped down, being, one of the big heads of Pixar and being one of the board of directors at Disney and such, that whole thing. For Catmull, not only is he still one of the founders of Pixar and such, being one of the big heads, but he's also the president of the Walt Disney Animation Studios, which, amazing, that's because that's the position that he would get at that time. And as for John Lasseter, well, him becoming, well, not only still being one of the big heads of Pixar, but also the chief officer of Walt Disney Animations and also the Disney parks. Just, what John would get, and as we all know, amazing. Yeah. Also, Lillian Disney, the late Lillian Disney, as well as the late Joe Grant, being in this documentary, what they had to say about John, and, just being a kid at heart, and when it comes to the Disney parks, and even Joe Grant pointing out that, him seeing John as like, almost like, a spitting image of Walt Disney, yeah. And it's nice because we hear some archival recordings of Walt, and just, yeah. And, and to name some of the others who, appeared in this documentary, because, There was also Alan Kay, Deidre Warren, if I'm saying that right. Dennis Muren. Yeah, because Dennis Muren appearing, because, yeah, can't believe I almost forgot to mention this, because with some of the computer animation that they would do in the 1980s, well, one of them being young Sherlock Holmes, doing this, you know, Glass Knight, if you know that, just, yeah, it's amazing, partnering with ILM on that. Also, another biggie for those at Pixar in the 80s, even before they officially became Pixar, those from, say, Catmull and Bill Reeves, doing the computer graphics and animation such, you know, visuals for the Genesis effect in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And yeah, that was something that even those at ILM could not achieve, only those at Lucasfilm and, you know, doing the computers and such, and what they brought to the Genesis effect in The Wrath of Khan, fantastic, yeah. There was also Lauren Carpenter, Rob Cook, Eben Osby. There was also Ralph Guggenheim, if I'm even pronouncing that right, Bonnie Arnold. There was also Lee Unkrich, of course. I know I mentioned him earlier. Leonard Maltin, Mike McCaffrey, Darla K. Anderson, Randy Nilsson, I already mentioned Nancy, James Ford Murphy, Glenn McQueen, the late Glenn McQueen, through archival footage, Doug Sweetland, and also those that were, no, they are credited, just, yeah, well, some are uncredited, but yeah, Barry Diller, those that are in archive footage and so on, Barry Diller, and also those that did voices in the documentary, Adam Lamaze, Teddy Newton, as I mentioned earlier. Scratch track narration was voiced by Reno Romano, yep. And there was also Christopher Sawyer appearing as himself, and 3 that, you know, are uncredited, and, you know, 2 archive footage, you know, who are uncredited. Well, I mean, just one of them, yeah. Because we hear John F. Kennedy's voice, because the whole thing of, as was mentioned in the documentary, you know, those fearing about computers and technology and thinking that they were taking their jobs, and also with animation, but, you know, Alvy Ray Smith pointing out that that wasn't the case, and just, you know, yeah, John F. Kennedy's voice that we hear, and the whole thing of the astronauts, and Robin Williams and Tom K. Gurney, yeah, but to name some of the others, and, you know, couldn't forget to mention, you know, the positions of, you know, what would happen for John, Ed, and Steve, so there you go. Yeah, things were looking better than ever at that time, and yeah, it's amazing. It's really amazing what happened, and a huge miracle happened for them. Yeah, not to mention Pixar's next film that would come out, this time with Pixar now being a part of the Disney family, Cars. Yeah, Cars being another big step for Pixar, them doing an entire computer animated film all about cars who are alive, and just, yeah, amazing. Yeah, just, you know, things looking better than ever for Pixar at that time. What would happen next to those at Pixar, and what they would do next after. You know, despite the fact that many years later, yeah, from, say, John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, but, you know, you get the point, because, yeah, I'm talking about how, you know, what it was like for Pixar, and because of this documentary, when it came out, just, yeah, things looking better than ever, and just, yeah, nice to see. Yeah. And, well, you know, even a mention of Pixar, you know, still going to go strong, and, you know, things are going to look really good for them in the future, which, yeah, even though, you know, even like in the later years, and as we all know, still, some ups and downs for Pixar, but still, doing pretty well. Just, yeah. And also, a very quick mentioning of the end credits, because I thought the end credits were pretty cool, because, you know, the characters, and, you know, them being built and such, and as the music plays and the credits, you know, like, you know, the models, you know, the computer animated models of, say, Mr. Incredible, Mater, Roz, Hopper, and Woody, just, yeah, awesome, yeah. The credits were pretty cool. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say as of this point. Just, yeah. The Pixar Story is an amazing documentary all about Pixar, with Leslie Iwerks writing and directing this, with Stacy Keach's narration, those who appeared in this documentary, and some of them through archival footage. Yeah, it's just amazing from beginning to end. The complete history of Pixar, where they started, and where they were at the time of this documentary. Everything about the Pixar Story, amazing. It's a really good documentary, and I of course, recommend it to those of you who, like me, are Pixar fanatics. And I'm giving the Pixar Story, well, what the heck, 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for the Pixar Story. And what about you guys? What did you think of the Pixar Story documentary itself? Any of you that have seen this before, loved it instantly, and especially for those of you like me who are Pixar fanatics and so on, just, yeah. What were some of your favorite moments from this documentary? Things that you never knew until you had seen this documentary. And anything that you knew before seeing this documentary, knowing the history of Pixar, and what more you learned watching this documentary, and your experience growing up and watching the Pixar films, and, you know, stuff that Pixar went through and such. Just, yeah. Overall, what do you think of the Pixar Story documentary itself, and with what all I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of the Pixar Story. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I'll see you guys in the next video / review. Take care, peace out, and to infinity and beyond.